Okay, so all of us have touched on jobs and making Central Florida as a community strong. So the first question that I'd like to ask the panel is that how do the goals of renewable portfolio standard from our level do that? How do they create jobs, and how do they infuse our community if we're going ahead and, you know, just gently raising the costs here on the individual person?
Well, an RPS is geared mainly towards large utility scale systems. So you will get jobs, but with the large utility scale systems, especially in Florida, we really don't have, the contractors in Florida don't have the solar experience to be doing large utility scale systems yet. I mean, we're working towards those ends. So a lot of these, you know, are going to be jobs will be created, but a lot of them will be temporary jobs. A lot of jobs are going to be companies coming in from out of state to do some of these very large projects. We need to see some kind of component for distributed generation in there, and Dr. Fenton touched briefly on it. Unless there's a distributed generation portion to the RPS, we're not going to create permanent jobs, and we're not going to grow the industry like we could. So there needs to be some sort of carve-out, I believe, for distributed generation in an RPS that would allow the local contractors to grow and to gain the experience necessary to do some of these bigger jobs and to move into some of these bigger jobs.
David?
Well, my take on the renewable portfolio standard is that, just like Chris was saying, large solar farms is good, but I also heard that we created 5,000 jobs to do a project or projects with FP&L. Those 5,000 people are probably looking for jobs right now. So although it does create jobs, it creates jobs on large solar farms just for the short term. What I'd like to see is put the solar on the rooftops, let the building owners benefit from it, and feed it into the grid, which is needed. So we have a lot of rooftops here, and that's what we have a lot of, and they're just sitting up there just soaking up the sun. So as far as distributed generation, I'd like to see on-site generation with solar energy. If those folks are going to pay the tab, let them benefit from it, whether it be a building owner, a commercial building, or whether it be a homeowner. The homeowner should have the renewable energy resource on their house. Jennifer and I go back a long ways. I've dealt with Progress Energy, FP&L, and I hear what they're trying to do. And what they would like to do is build large solar farms. But the reality of the situation, in my perspective, is put it on site, get it on the rooftops, and if Floridians are paying for it, then they ought to be able to benefit from it directly. Job growth. That's what I just referred to earlier with job growth. There is a job growth and job creation to putting it on homes and buildings is a lot more sustainable than just building large solar farms. Now, that's what my biggest, what I would like to see most is in job creation. And I'm being redundant here, but in my experience of 30 years, I can put a lot more people to work if we're doing it on our personal homes and if we're doing it on buildings than we are building solar farms. And there's a more direct effect for those homeowners. More beneficial for homeowners to have it on their roof than it is to pay for programs through programs to build solar farms. First of all, you get charged to build a farm, and then what's your benefit? I think we need to get on the customer side of the meter and deal with it that way.
I agree with David. The RPS is going to create jobs on a smaller scale at first. It's going to push for more statewide incentives, get the residential and commercial customers up and running, and then we'll be able to touch on the solar farms. And the jobs for the solar farms will be people that have been in the industry for 10, 15 years, and that's coming from California or other states that have been set up with an RPS.
Thank you. David mentioned and Dr. Fenton mentioned about putting PV up on top of schools. And David mentioned how we don't have enough qualified people here in Central Florida to go ahead and do PV installations of large magnitudes. How do we, how will an RPS, if at all, help us educate our youth with regards to these renewable resources and these renewable technologies? Will that added market to Florida actually perpetuate some learning curriculum that'll support and allow the industry to go?
Well, I think, we're talking about distributed generation here, but we are all, there is a need for both. There is a need for large scale and small scale. There has to be a balance. And if we have an RPS, and we're already starting to see solar on homes, and we're starting to see solar on businesses, it's not as much as we would like, but, and there's going to be a natural move to push this into, and especially with the programs that FSEC and with the stimulus dollars we're getting for solar for schools, and there's other solar programs through stimulus money. We are starting to see it move into the schools, and we're starting to see education, and a lot of schools. The school right next to our office, Lyman High School, has a solar system on it. So it is part of their curriculum right now. These students that go into these high schools and middle schools, they learn about the solar system on their school. And as we start to see big farms like the 110 megawatts that FP&L has done, and some other projects, I mean, it is going to be part of our education system. They are going to have to start learning about solar moving forward. So, as we build, it will move into the school system, I believe, and it already has started doing that. And the federal government is giving us money to help with that, those efforts through the stimulus program.
I had the opportunity to install through the Sunwise for Schools 5 different schools systems that All Solar, my company, has been able to install. I appreciate the efforts, and the money's coming down to educate the young folks. I think the young people get it. I just don't think the legislators do. I think it was said that the 10-year-olds, it might be easier to talk to the 10-year-olds than it is the 50-year-olds. It's their future. And there was a clip in the Orlando Sentinel I clipped out, and I sent it to my daughter who just had a child. And it showed a doctor holding up the child, and it was crying, mouth wide open. And the nurse says, "Well, why is it crying so hard?" And the doctor said, "Well, it just found out what its share of the national debt was." To move forward, and I was speaking to others earlier, and I asked a question about the House of Representatives. Why aren't they on board? The fact of the matter is we have no visionaries, and we lack leadership. We have to look forward, not to today, and it was said before, every time I hear about solar, they say, "When's the payback?" When's the payback? Well, you got to look on the back end. If we don't do it, what is the cost going to be then? It's going to be astronomical. Globally, proliferation of solar globally. China, talk about the Chinese. They're going to own our marketplace. If we don't bring, and the state does not come up with a strong renewable portfolio standard, we will always buy from other folks. Floridians will always be dependent on foreign oil or foreign manufactured products that will eventually wake up and see that we need. So we need to come up with the right product. I've talked to people, the manufacturers from Kyocera, from other manufacturers that would love to come in Florida. Everybody talks about this 30,000-foot view. Well, these folks aren't even at 30,000 feet with Florida. They're circling New Jersey and California and those places where they can land to put their plants. They're looking at New Jersey right now. They would love to be in Florida. It's a better distribution point for them for the Caribbean and South America. We got to get outside of the box here. Get to the legislators and let them know. I hear, like I said, I was a president, and I've heard all of the legislative committee meetings and all of the different folks, and you got a meeting here, and you got a symposium over there, and it's all rhetoric. It's just rhetoric. The problem is that what we may need to do, and what I'd like to propose, is to do a referendum. Take it out of the people, take it out of the legislators' hands, because they don't have the vision, and they think if they put a tax, this might be considered a tax on the citizens, and that would be political suicide. They may not want to do it. So the citizens of Florida need to put, in my opinion, need to put a referendum together, take it out of the legislature, and put it on the ballot. Because I've heard over and over again, I hear people say every single day, hey, solar's a great idea. I might do it someday. You know? I don't ever hear somebody say, hey, solar's a bad idea. That's the worst thing. It pollutes, it's going to kill, it's, you know, it's a great idea. We have sunshine, a lot of it here. So I would like to even pose to you folks out there to even think about putting a referendum together and show Tallahassee that we have the vision and we're willing to take the risk. Now, we could all talk, like I just said, we could all talk about this RPS, and I want to continue to talk about it, but I think we need to go forward and do something that the legislators can't do themselves.
I agree with Chris and David on how we're going to educate the youth. It's, you know, the solar energy systems at the schools are going to be part of the curriculum in the future. And like David stated, it's easier to educate a 10-year-old than it is a 50-year-old. Renewable energy just makes sense. It generates savings, no pollution, and I think the youth of America are going to see the greener side of things.
Kimberly, I get so excited because I decided to put a solar thermal system on top of my house, solar water system. And I live, unfortunately, in an area that is governed by a co-op. So when I went to them and told them about my bright idea, they pretty much said, well, that's nice, but it's not going to help you any with us. So would an RPS address that with co-ops?
Co-ops are not required by the RPS right now. They're not investor-owned utilities. They're not required to be
no help.
Renewable. So you would have to negotiate a term price with them. Right now they're buying energy fed into the grid, and most of them do have the net metering set up, but half of them do not. And the avoided cost is the cost minus the fuel the energy cost minus the fuel cost, which is at 6 cents on average.
So what do we do? Is there anything that we can do to address those that do not live, that do not have an investor-owned utility company?
Well, the legislature would have to direct, and the legislature did in 7135 direct the co-ops to adopt net metering, similar to what the IOUs did. So the legislature has the power to say, you guys need to get on board. So that's where it would have to come from, the legislature, for the co-ops. And they're always, you know, some of them are progressive like Jennifer and OUC, and some of them are not as progressive. You know. But for the most part, I would say the munis and the co-ops have had better programs before the IOUs had programs in place. So for the most part, the munis and the co-ops are, you know, kind of lead the way. And OUC, you know, I think OUC and JEA probably have the best policies in the state when it comes to solar programs.